If you think that copying your competitors is enough, think again. I often see this with some of my clients. They're losing customers and they're playing catch up. And there's really two key assumptions here. The first one is if we can just offer the same as our competitors, we'll stop losing customers. And the second is that if we can have that parity with our competitors, we will win our competitive edge back and we'll be able to acquire new customers and even potentially win some of those customers back that we've lost. But is this really enough? I'm going to explain in a moment that it isn't, and I want to do that through this great behavioral model that really illustrates the point. American social scientist and author B.J. Fogg came up with what he calls the Fogg behavioral model. And the way that it works is essentially he maps behavior, or more specifically, the prompts or triggers to initiate new behavior into two dimensions. So basically what we have is we have a 2x2 matrix. And on the y-axis, we have motivation. Essentially asking ourselves, like, do we really want this high motivation or high value versus low value, right? And then along the x-axis, he has what he calls ability. Now, ability is a funny word, but the way that he basically describes it is it easy or hard to do? So is it an easy thing to do or is it hard to do? And what he basically essentially maps out here is that there's a relationship between these two. So when our motivation is high, then we can overcome things or have the motivation to do things that are not easy. And essentially when our motivation is low, things need to be easy in order for us to adopt them and do it. Now this seems simple enough, right? Or straightforward enough. Makes sense? So when our ability is, when it's hard to do, we need a lot of motivation. And when it's easy to do, we need a low amount of motivation. And basically what he describes is he says that triggers, as he calls them, or prompts, will succeed over here when they're above the line. And triggers below the line, or prompts, will fail. So just to give an example of this, if something is really, really hard to do, then, and I don't have enough motivation to basically overcome that barrier, I'm not going to do it. And when I have a high level degree of motivation, I will overcome it. And even if it's something really easy to do, if I've got a high amount of motivation to do it, I will do it. Now, this becomes a super interesting model when we start to consider user behavior in these scenarios. Now, when you've got a less superior product than your competitors, then your competitors are delivering more value over here on the y-axis than you. So therefore, as long as the effort in order to change is above this line, even if they provide a little bit more value than at the moment, it can succeed and people will actually move across. So they're providing new value. If it's easy to switch, they're going to move across. Now, when you think about scenarios like moving back and trying to win customers back, if you provide the same level of value, then there's no extra motivation. Like motivation is going to be really low. It's going to be down here. There's no extra motivation in order to put all that effort in order to switch back. So this doesn't work. Trying to have the same feature parity in order to win customers back does not work. What it does work for, however, is it can work for retention. You can start to lower that motivation over here, therefore move in this now below the line and therefore into the fail area, right? Where it's not going to succeed. And then you're going to basically stop losing customers. So parity can work from a retention point of view, but it's definitely not going to work from a point of view of trying to win customers back. Now, if we think about the other dimension that we have here, where we start to talk about your competitive edge and winning customers, well, now when we start to look at motivation, you're essentially comparing product A to product B, and they now start to look exactly the same. There still isn't a competitive advantage here. There's no additional motivation to sway them over here and put your competitors over here. There's nothing like that. There's no additional value that you're providing. So why would they basically pick you over somebody else? So feature parity alone is not enough. It's not enough to win new customers, and it's definitely not enough to win customers back. It can work in terms of retention, but that is all you're going to do. A better way to think about it and to leverage this model is to think about what motivation you can provide. What value can you give? And can you make that high enough that essentially you've got all of this real estate where people are going to pick you over competitors, and then your competitors are going to have to find something in order to compete with that. Otherwise, they're going to land in this fail category, right? You want to push that motivation up high enough. And again, try and consume all this real estate and occupy that space for your customers, and not down here, and put all your competitors down here, essentially, right? Now, of course, there's scenarios where parity is necessary. I'm not saying that it's not. There's definitely scenarios where functionality that is missing is like table stakes, it's hygiene level. We need to have them. And otherwise, like this whole model and this whole thinking is not going to work. But once you've got those things out of the way, the great thing about this model and trying to apply it is to try and apply it in terms of user behavior. How do you start to either increase motivation or even decrease the ability for customers to switch to you? Because another lever point that you have is to do just that. So you could push yourself over to this half of the quadrant, and maybe I should use different colors here, but you start to push yourself to this half of the quadrant, which means you can occupy this space, which means that you can give smaller amounts of motivation, right? Like your motivation's down here. I drew that line a bit high, and you can work your way up. So you can occupy this space instead. And I'm just going to highlight it with this thing now to make it a lot easier to see. You start to occupy this space, so you can deliver less value, but easier in relation to your competitors. Now, the only caveat I put on this one is it is a tricky space to play in, because your competitors can always also lower the barriers to entry, and they can make things easier. So whilst you've got it easy to begin with, and that's your competitive advantage to begin with, it is not as strong as a competitive advantage as value is. So if you can index over here on the motivation side, that is a much more powerful lever than the ability lever. But you've got both of them at your disposal, hence why I wanted to cover them. One last thing that you can think about and apply by using this model is also to think about how you can get these two dimensions to work. Now, this is where things like switching costs as a moat starts to come into play. So the notion behind switching costs is the longer somebody uses your product, or the more that they use it, the more investment or cost they incur in order to switch, right? So in other words, to put it in simple English, it makes it harder for them to switch to a competitor. Think about things like LastPass. The more passwords you accumulate, once you've got hundreds of passwords in there, it's going to be a very expensive endeavor in order to switch to a competitor. So even if a competitor has more value than you, you're essentially switching over to this side of the fence. And I know this picture is getting really messy, but you're starting to put ability high, which means that you start to create a smaller real estate for competitors to operate in order to get successfully win customers from you, right? Now, this only works from a retention strategy and to be able to maintain competitive advantage into the future. You still need to have that motivation. You still need to be over here, have this motivation to begin with. But you can leverage tactics and strategies like switching costs in order to, once people adopt your product, so get them to adopt it in the first place, and then push them right to the left-hand side, push them, make the ability to switch really, really hard, which then gives your competitors, or squeezes your competitors, and puts a very small amount of real estate for them to be able to play in order to win those customers from you. But you still need to have that motivation to get them to sign up in the first place. So with all that said, BJ Fogg behavioral model is a very interesting and a great tool to be able to apply to your products and to think about in terms of your user behavior. I think the main thing to take away from this is think about how you can increase that unique value that you give, because you're far better off giving a new type of value, a new unique type of value that is so valuable that your customers are going to pick you over your competitors, even if you are lacking functionality and you may not have all the bells and whistles that they have. Just, you need to find that one thing that you have that is so valuable that you're going to push customers into this, into the success region and not into the failure region, right? I hope you got value out of this video. This is a common topic that comes up a lot with my clients. So I thought I'd sit down and make a video on it. Apologies that the sketch got a little bit messy. And if you need help building successful products or scaling your impact as a product manager, check out Product Pathways. And on that note, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching. All the comments, likes, and watches all support this, supports my channel, supports me being able to build great content with Product Pathways. I appreciate you all. I appreciate it all. And I'll see you at the next one.